Woo! Hi! I hate the way that I say hi. Hello. Welcome back? Ew. No. Hello. Hello? Hello. Hello. Maybe the title is clickbait. But one day in the future, the title won't be clickbait anymore. One day. Way back when I first started watching BookTube, I watched Emmy start her read around the world challenge. I liked that she was like, I'm not just doing like any book, I want to do like a relevant book. That was the exact moment that I was inspired, because you can talk all day about how fiction is different, you know, in different places and how stories are told differently. But I think more so what I am looking for as I began this journey was a larger perspective. I didn't just want to read a bunch of different books that had nothing to do with the world that we live in today. I wanted to do something that was important, and obviously there's all of history, so you know, maybe this is a lifelong journey of forever reading more books from unfamiliar places. But this is my Read Around the World challenge. So far I have read eight countries out of 140, but these are my first 8. First, we have Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Vuong. I have not read On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous, but to me, Vuong's memories of Vietnam felt so poignant, and it just felt so modern as well. I would probably consider Vuong a modern classic author. I think most people would too, because when I think about literature that is made modernly that is going to last, you know, to become that eventual classic, Vuong absolutely comes to mind. So if you can't tell, I did very much enjoy this. It's quite a sad poetry collection, but to me it's not like, it doesn't feel like A Little Life, like it doesn't feel like the sadness is there to make the reader emote. This is just the sadness that was experienced portrayed into words. So I feel like it's very realistic and impactful in the way that it's realistic. Just has a way with words, man, that really transport you to the experience being had in the poetry, which I feel like poetry is not normally story formatted, so it's very was a very great read for that reason as well. I would like to probably read something else from Vietnam, because I do feel like this was a little bit of an easy and accessible fic, so I will probably end up picking up something else from an author in Vietnam. So Vietnam. Next, this is also a recommendation from Emmy, who inspired this whole thing. This is The Ice Fields. And this is a book about glaciers that are existing at the top of Canada. So I felt like it was very logistically, slightly historically representative of Canada, of an experience and a part of Canada's history. Ice Fields is about a man who goes hiking on a glacier and he falls in a crack and he sees something. And it's about his journey back to the ice to see if what he saw down there was real or not. It's a very interesting journey. I was kind of like confused where it was going until the very end hit. So it wasn't like, it's probably definitely one of the lower ranked ones on this list. But I still thought that it was a very enjoyable and honestly light read, even though it was talking about like very weird and scientifical concepts. Scientific. It felt very human. I mean, and human. Science applies to humans, but it felt human in a human way, not human in a science way, if that makes any sense. So that is Canada. Next, we have A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Beah. This is Ishmael Beah's memoir. He was taken from his home as a boy and enlisted into the army at the age of 12. He was taken, he became a soldier, pillaging, you know, working in the soldier crew, doing drugs. This is a very intense story. Beware of the trigger warnings, but I think Ishmael Bey does a good job at explaining his thoughts and emotions more so than the actual experiences themselves. In that way, like, it's a beautiful memoir because it is about a very common experience that people have had in Sierra Leone. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's culturally relevant because of that, but I also felt like Ishmael Bey's personal story of not only his experiences being a boy soldier, but of his experiences in how he healed from that experience. That's like the second half of the whole book, is they get saved and they get provided resources, and it's about, like, you know, ultimately his healing and his ability to speak for his people. It was very touching, very moving, and I think that Ishmael Bey had a great voice that is so, you know, important to listen to. So this is, I believe I think I gave this one 5 stars. I'm pretty sure, because it's an important story. I think everybody should read it because everybody should know about Ishmael Bey. So that is Sierra Leone. I'm losing my light. Next we have, I've talked about this one quite a couple times on my channel because it's one of my favorite reads that I've read this year, honestly. This is A Border Station by Shane Connaughton. This is a story about a boy. It's semi-autobiographical of Shane Connaughton's life, of a boy who grows up on the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. I know that political history is really complex. I do now, at least, because when I first cracked this book open, there was so much that I did not understand because I didn't really understand the politics of what was going on. So I actually had to do a little bit of research to crack into this book fully. But I'm really happy that it encouraged me to do that, because I feel like after the research, the benefit that I received from this book was way out there. Like, Shane Connaughton does a great job at portraying the physical, the metaphysical, the spiritual issues created by a border, despite the country being the same country, you know, Ireland and Northern Ireland. The existence of the border here changes everything. Not only that, because it is through the perspective of a very young kid, there's like colored glasses that you're looking through, because you as the reader understand what's going on, but the child that is experiencing these things does not. And so it's an interesting analysis of how borders affect kids. I'm going to count this as the Republic of Ireland. I will read something from Northern Ireland, because I know now that they are quite culturally different. I feel more educated about the history of the world, which is like why I set out to do this. Probably why this ended up being some of my favorite of this entire stack that I have so far, because it's the type of reason that I started the challenge in the first place. It very much reminded me of my search for the knowledge of the world outside my own bubble. That is the Republic of Ireland. Next. This is actually one of my favorite books that I read last year, because I did start this challenge last year. But this is Industrial Park by Patricia Galvao, and I talked about this one in my last video, just like I talked about A Border Station, and I talked about another one. I just couldn't help but share them. Maybe I'll try and keep this one brief. Patricia Galvao was a woman in Brazil during Brazil's communist movement. During the Industrial Revolution, women moved from being homemakers into factories, into jobs and things like that. And along with that and all the abuses that we know came with the Industrial Revolution came the inspiration of the proletariat. So that's what this is. If you can see, this is a proletarian novel, because this is about the workers, specifically the women, and that's why I loved this one so much, because I think it gives such a unique women's perspective that you just don't get in historical-esque writings. It's just not something that you get. You get the caricatures of the woman, or the characters of a woman trying to make a point or prove something. This was just women I could imagine and envision these women going to work, these women transitioning from taking care of the home, from everything that they knew, into the, you know, dirt and dust of factories and things like that. Not only that, but Patricia Galvao's amazing. Her writing was, it's almost like poetry. Like, I know it says a novel, and it does tell a story, so I think that's why it's a novel, but it's written in this prose almost that's like an epic tale. It reminds me of like Odysseus or something, not in its complexity, but in its pattern, in its story beats. This one was just so amazing, and I've already lent it out to multiple people. I think that's a really big that's a really big testament how much I like a book, is how quickly and how many people I lend it out to. Like my favorite book that I've read this year, I've already lent out to 3 different people, and they've already all read it. So the fact that I've already lent this out to people and they returned it means it's a good book. Checkmate. Checkmate. Anti-communist. This is Brazil. I talked about this one in my last video too, so I know. I'm sorry. Collective Amnesia by Koleka Putuma. She wrote and published this in 2017 that basically like created a shift in South African poetry, because women's voices, you know, aren't heard in that area. And that's kind of what Koleka Putuma also talks about in this. She talks about the difference between the self that is at home and the self that is out in public. She's also queer, and so she talks a lot about the struggles of being queer in a more conservative place. Her representation of being queer and wanting so badly to free the people that you love, the family that you love too, because ultimately that's what being queer is about freeing yourself from the constraints that have been put upon you. And the way that Koleka Putuma portrays that, the pain of trying to free the people that you love from those constraints, but yet that makes you their enemy, is heartbreakingly raw. Every single poem, every single line, I almost want to describe it as like coffee, like it's like that sense that goes all the way through your nose and right, and your whole brain just like goes fuzzy. I mean, Collective Amnesia, I think that the title is stunning, so fitting. And this is a book that I think everybody should read. Even non-poetry readers, I think, would fall in love with this because it's so accessible. It's very non-poetry like. It's more so like in free verse almost. And it's very modern. It's so... I'm so picky about my modern poetry. So to find this and to find it so beautifully stunning, perfect in its communications, everybody needs to read this. That's why I'm talking about it again. That's why I'm talking about the other ones again, because I just think everybody needs to read them. Other people's stories are important. I just don't know how to properly communicate the essentiality of that phrase. Everybody has their own story, and only in understanding and accepting that everybody has their own story do we allow our own self to step outside of our story, to unindividualize ourselves, to create a self in which is like constantly moving, constantly flowing with the flow of the world. That's, you know, again, that's why I'm out here. That's why I'm doing this, because this is a different type of reading to me. Like, man, I've read so many fictional books in my whole life. Like, that's all that I've read up until a few years ago. And what fictional books give you through a lens, things like this, like Industrial Park and A Border Station, that are semi-autobiographical of people's real experiences, they give you that raw and unfiltered. There's no lens. There's nothing there between you and that other person's experience. And that is so beautiful. You and another person connecting on a very deep level. It almost feels like that. Like this person is sitting next to me, telling me their story. And I am lucky and grateful enough to hear it. So you're damn right I'm gonna listen. Koleka Putuma, I love you. This is South Africa. Okay, this one is kind of a obvious pick. I have Franz Kafka, a story collection by Franz Kafka for the Czech Republic, which is where he was born. I had never read anything by Kafka. I felt seriously drawn to him though, and I feel like after reading his works, everybody, like, everything that everybody says about him is simultaneously completely true and completely untrue. And I don't know, I don't have a better way to explain it to you than that. This was great. Metamorphosis, probably my least favorite story of the bunch. I really loved the Penal Colony. That short story blew me away. That one was so good. I have The Way Home marked. I have The Passenger. I really liked his short blips. But like honestly, I really did not like the Metamorphosis. I found myself to the end of Metamorphosis and was like, okay, like I get it, but like why? I really thought like almost everything else that I read in here was way better. In learning more about him, I also read an autobiography about him at the same time that I read this, and so learning about his life to me was actually quite a bit more fascinating than his writing almost. I feel like without the two together, neither would have as much meaning. So like reading this along with reading his experiences of his life really enhanced the reading experience of it for me. I feel like this is a writer whose past, whose life is very much part of their art. Like sometimes there are people that, you know, the things that they do, the things that they make had nothing to do with the way that they live or what they do, you know, in their life. But I feel like every word that he wrote was driven by the life that he lived, and so I think it's very important to understand the life that he lived to fully get Kafka. I think maybe that's why he's a little dense for some people, because people don't like look up and think about their authors. I don't know, I do. I think about my authors a lot. I understand it, I get it. Another sad dude in history to add to my collection of sad dudes that I love. This is the Czech Republic. Final one, and let me make this clear. Trigger warning for this one because it is very, very intense, but is also, I think I am making this decision right now, even more so than Collective Amnesia. No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. What the fuck, dude? What the pain and suffering, raw pain. Maybe, and it like might be a little too real for some people. I think that's mostly what it is, in that like it's not trauma porn or anything by any means, but it is so very, very real. Osamu Dazai is probably still one of the most famous writers in Japan. He basically started this movement of personable, mundane stories. I think you find a lot of that in Japanese literature now. I mean, think of like Banana Yoshimoto and things like. This is where it started, was his books. He wrote quite a few. This is his very last one that he wrote, and he wrote it 2 months before he killed himself. This book is about a man who goes through several misfortunes and kills himself. Like I said, it's intense. The thing about this is the main character in here, his focus is that he doesn't understand human emotion. He doesn't think that he feels the same emotions that other people around him feel. And I thought that that meant that this whole book was going to be just a list of statements, factually proven, you know, nerd speak. And the fact that it was a human ripped open and pouring their soul out was, I don't have words. Despite the lack of understanding emotions, our main character still understands what it's like to be alive. So often when we approach situations, we approach them emotionally first. How am I going to feel about this? What am I going to think about this? You make those decisions based on those first impressions, based on your feelings. And with that lens taken away, it gives the starting point of thought such like a further along starting point. Like you start so much internally deeper in this man's mind because there's no emotion to sift through. I've never read something like that. I've never read something. This is unlike anything that I have ever read. I'm blown away. Even just like thinking about it now, like vivid emotional flashbacks for me, because I understand the emotions that this character doesn't, and that's why it's so conflicting. It just gets your brain going. Like, you are getting a perspective that is so uncommon, so deeply uncommon. Obviously, like I said, this inspired a lot of Japanese literature, which is why I chose this one as my pick for Japan. It's really set a precedent in certain types of fictional literature for Japanese culture. This came out in like the 1930s. Like, he set a standard that has since been carried on. Amazing. Alrighty guys, that is everything. That is it. Thanks for watching. If you have any recommendations, hit me with that down below, because I definitely don't know everything. I would like to. Join me next time on our search to know everything here at Natalie and Company. It's not an unrealistic goal. It's just delusional. Bye.